Hey friends. So in this video, what we're going to do is talk about the myth of dispassionate investigation, and specifically what it does. So we saw in the last clip that the myth of dispassionate investigation holds that that scientific investigation, or doing science, forming knowledge generally, is a matter of being objective in the sense that we leave aside our subjective emotions and feelings and evaluations and biases, right? That's what it is to be objective. We saw also in the last clip, or in the last video, that we have reasons to doubt this, right? We've seen not only values at work in science in the past, but we've also seen, we also saw how emotion plays a role in the identification and selecting of evidence. So if the myth is wrong, why is it here in the first place? How did it get here? So one way to ask this question is to ask, what does the myth do, right? What is the social function of this myth? Well, the social function of the myth is to prop up values which promote or valorize the opinions of wealthy white men. So, how do we get there? Notice first that men are typically thought of as rational and non-emotional, right? So when we think about our myth of men right now, the myth of men is that we are, I say we, right? Is that we are rational and that we don't get all emotional, feely and stuff. Right? So, the myth of dispassionate investigation then elevates the knowledge of wealthy white men over others. We have this sort of cultural idea that women are overly emotional, and so are folks of color, but white men are the ones who are rational and are sort of able to steady out emotions' influence or be stable in the face of emotional influences. And since knowledge is thought of as rational, in the sense we've talked about before, that means that the knowledge, the beliefs, the opinions of white men are elevated over those of folks of color and women. So, women and folks of color are typically silenced in favor of men. As a result of this, dominant values, the dominant cultural values, are those that preferentially help rich white men. Right? So we value, being rational. We value non-emotion, right? And so this as an ideal works its way into our culture, into our educational systems, into our myth about how science works, and into our politics. Furthermore, these values get under the skin because emotions and values are linked to one another, as we saw when we first started talking about Jaggar's paper. So these values that preferentially help the dominant class, these get internalized by us. And as a result, they end up shielding off or blinkering us to other ways of living, other ways of being. And so then, non-conventional emotions tend to be a problem, right? That is to say, emotions that are in violation of well-entrenched dominant values. These are what Jaggar calls outlaw emotions, right? So outlaw emotions are those emotions that are non-conventional, that challenge the dominant values. So we saw this, for example, with emotions like homosexual desire in the early to mid 20th century in the US. Right? Because homosexual desire challenged well-entrenched values about, heterosexual, about heteronormativity, these desires were outlaw emotions. And so what the myth does is it helps to squash outlaw emotions and just keep the dominant emotions, those feelings, those values that help out wealthy white men. It keeps those in play and keeps them and propagates them and shows them as the valuable ways to live.